All right, so let's dive into one of the most talked about Heisman races ever. You sent a ton of articles and social media posts, and like everyone's buzzing about Travis Hunter and Ashton Jeanty.
Yeah, it was wild.
It really was. So in this deep dive, we're going to break down why the race was so close and like explore the arguments for and against each player. And ultimately, we'll understand why Travis Hunter won the trophy.
And we'll also touch on what it means for the future of the Heisman. I think this race might have changed things forever.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. So picture this. It's December 14th, 2024. The Heisman ceremony is about to start, and four players are waiting to hear their name. We've got Travis Hunter from Colorado, Ashton Jeanty from Boise State, Dylan Gabriel from Oregon, and Cam Ward from Miami.
A very talented group for
Yeah.
sure. But before the ceremony even started, social media was already blowing up, and it was all Hunter versus Janey.
It was like the whole sports world was picking sides. So to understand the arguments, we need to start with Ashton Jeanty. This guy was like a workhorse for Boise State.
Oh yeah, Boise State wouldn't have even made the playoffs without him.
Well, absolutely. He was on track to break the all-time FBS rushing record. Some fans even said he represents the golden era of college football. You know, a throwback to players who stay loyal to their school, especially compared to some of the other finalists who'd transferred.
There's definitely a conversation happening about loyalty in college football now.
Yeah.
Like we even saw those players at SDSU turn down huge NIL deals, like 6 figures, to stay with the team.
Yeah, and that commentator made a good point. Is loyalty making a comeback? Maybe those players saw it as a long-term thing, you know, staying at SDSU as an investment, so they could get even bigger offers later on.
It's a great question. Like, are we seeing a shift where players want long-term growth more than money right now?
Uh-huh.
And how will that affect college football?
Yeah, lots to think about there. But back to Janicki, his stats were undeniable. Like one commentator said that every running back who's ever rushed for 2,000 yards and scored 20 touchdowns on a top 10 team has won the Heisman.
Every single one, except Janicki.
Exactly. So what was different about this year? Now on the other side, we have Travis Hunter. They call him the two-way alien.
And he's earned that nickname, playing offense and defense at an elite level. Basically never comes off the field.
He's insane. And get this, he won both the Bednarik Award for Best Defensive Player and the Biletnikoff for Best Receiver. Has that ever happened before?
I don't think so. It's crazy. He's getting compared to Charles Woodson, who won the Heisman in '97. He played both ways, too. But even Woodson didn't play nearly as much on both sides as Hunter did.
It's mind-boggling, but this brings up something interesting that people on Reddit were talking about. Would Hunter have won if he hadn't played for Colorado? You know, with all the hype around Deion Sanders and that program.
It's a good question. Did all that hype affect how people voted? It's hard to know for sure.
So we have two amazing players, both making history in different ways. And it starts this big debate about what really matters for the Heisman Trophy.
And that leads to the snap count debate. Hunter played almost 700 snaps on offense and 700 on defense. He was the only Power 5 player to play 30-plus snaps on both sides of the ball.
Wow. So does just playing a lot make you the most outstanding, or is it about what you do in those snaps? It's a tough one. And people have debated it for years. I think some voters might have been drawn to Hunter being a two-way player. You know, like it was something new. Did that take away from what Jeanty did, even though he broke records?
And there's that classic argument, too, about who the best player is. Some say the Heisman should go to the best no matter what. Others say it's about who helps their team win the most. It doesn't matter about their position or stats.
Which is interesting because Hunter's team didn't win their conference, but Jeanty's team made it to the playoffs.
Exactly. And someone on Reddit said something I can't stop thinking about. What if we swap the schools? Would people feel differently?
It really makes you think, are we putting individual talent over the team? Or is something else happening here?
Yeah, it's like there's all this stuff that we can't see on the stat sheet, you know? Like, how do you measure a player's personality or the story behind them?
That's so true. Can't really put a number on those things. But they definitely seem to be part of this whole Heisman thing.
Right. Hunter was the betting favorite for weeks leading up to the ceremony. And that's got to mean something, right? It wasn't just about stats. They were thinking about other stuff, too.
Yeah. And on Reddit, everyone was talking about how much they liked Hunter, how genuine he seemed, and how he represented his school well.
And then you see all the stuff about Boise State. Some people were saying their fans were like, way too much, maybe even toxic. They were so focused on Jeanty's stats that it was turning people off.
Yeah, it's weird how that becomes part of it. It's like there's this PR battle happening at the same time as the actual games.
It does. So does a player's personality or their story matter for the Heisman? And how much should it matter?
That's tough. On the one hand, you want it to be about how they play, you know? what happens on the field.
But you can't ignore that these guys are more than just athletes. They're in the public eye.
Yeah.
And their personalities and stories become part of it.
Especially with social media now, every little thing they do goes viral and people judge them for it.
It's true. It's like there's this whole other game happening off the field.
So, back to that night. The ceremony was electric. You could feel how tense everyone was waiting for them to announce the winner.
And then they said it. Travis Hunter.
The place went crazy. Well, maybe not everyone.
Yeah, Jay Naughty's fans were definitely upset. It was really close, though. Closer than people thought it would be.
But even the fact that it was a debate shows how amazing both those players were.
For sure. And that brings us to the big question. Did Travis Hunter change the Heisman forever?
Will we see more guys playing both ways now, trying to win it?
Or will people go back to liking the running backs and quarterbacks who put up the biggest numbers?
It's like the Heisman itself is changing, trying to figure out what's really important in a player.
Yeah, that's what makes this whole conversation so interesting.
So what do we do with all this going forward? What can we learn?
Well, I think for college players, this shows that playing both ways is a real way to win the Heisman now. We might see more guys trying to do what Hunter did.
Imagine that high schoolers all over thinking, I could do that.
It's exciting to think about. What if it makes players focus even more on just one side of the ball? Or maybe we'll see more players who can do it all, like a comeback for that kind of athlete.
And how would coaches change things? How do you train someone to be great on both sides?
That's a good point. Maybe we'll see totally new ways to train players.
So if we ignore all the hype and predictions, what does this all mean?
I think it shows how the idea of being outstanding in college football is changing. For years, it was all about stats for quarterbacks and running backs. The Heisman was predictable.
And then now?
Now anything could happen. It could be a two-way player, a defensive guy, or someone we haven't even thought of yet.
It's like they're telling young players to push the limits to change what's possible.
And for fans, it means the Heisman race is going to be even more exciting. We might see some crazy winners in the future.
I love that. So to sum everything up, what does this all mean for you listening?
You've learned a lot more about what happened in this Heisman race than just the basic stuff.
You've heard both sides. You've thought about the stats and the stories. And you've seen how things like personality and what people think can matter.
And hopefully you're wondering what's going to happen to this award in the future.
Maybe the next Heisman winner is out there right now, working hard, going against what people expect, and getting ready to change the game all over again.
We'll be right here to talk about it with you when it happens, right here on The Deep Dive.
Always fun talking with you. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about what this means for the Heisman going forward.
Right. Like we're at this point where things could change.
If you can win the Heisman by playing both ways, it's a whole new ballgame for these young guys.
Yeah, it's like a whole other thing to worry about now.
I wonder, will we see a bunch of players trying to do what Hunter did and be good on both sides?
Or what if it makes guys focus even more on just offense or our defense? Like to really stand out. There's so many ways this could go.
I can just see it now. High school kids watching Hunter win and thinking, I want to do that. It's pretty inspiring. And it could change the whole sport.
So stepping back from all of that, what are the big takeaways from this whole thing?
It shows how the idea of an outstanding player is changing. You know, for years, it was all about quarterbacks and running backs with huge stats.
Yeah, you could basically guess who'd win just by looking at the numbers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But now, who knows? It could be a two-way guy, a defensive beast, or someone we haven't even thought of yet.
It's like they're daring these young players to change everything, to be better than anyone's ever been.
And for us fans, it makes the Heisman way more exciting. We could see some wild winners.
I love it. So wrapping it all up, what does this mean for you listening at home?
You know way more about this Heisman race than just the headlines.
You've heard both sides. You've thought about the stats and the stories and how people's personalities can matter.
And hopefully you're thinking about what's going to happen to the Heisman in the future.
Maybe the next Heisman winner is out there right now, working their butt off, doing things no one expects, and getting ready to change everything.
And we'll be here to talk about it with you when it happens on The Deep Dive.
Always great chatting with you. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.